For the first time ever, Trick Room is a viable strategy in singles, and it's mainly because of Ursaluna, and it can be explained by something I call the viability spectrum. Certain strategies are limited by the number of turns they're active, like Weather, Aurora Veil, Trick Room, etc. Strategies which are only active for a few turns need to have a high payoff per turn to justify themselves, otherwise you'd be spending too much time and energy to set up a strategy that gets over quickly. On the other hand, strategies which are active for many turns don't need as high a payoff per turn because they have more turns to work with. Tailwind only lasts 4 turns, and you often have to spend 1 turn moving from the Tailwind setter to the Tailwind abuser. 3 turns is basically no time at all. You spend 1 to 2 turns to set up Tailwind in the first place, and the reward is only modest. Doubling your speed is nice, but it's not like you're one-hit KOing every Pokemon because of it. It has a low payoff, and as a result, Tailwind is a never-seen strategy. In the other extreme, we have Gen 5 Permanent Weather and Swift Swim. Permanent Weather means you had infinite time to work with, and doubling your speed and a power boost is massive. It's why Drizzle plus Swift Swim was eventually banned in Generation 5. Every time-based strategy has a break-even point for deciding whether or not it's worth using. For example, Sand strategies with Excadrill were pretty viable. With a Smooth Rock, Sand would last 8 turns, which was not as good as Infinite, but not as bad as 4. The payoff of being able to try and sweep with a powerful Excadrill was worth it. However, in Generation 9, Excadrill isn't in the game, and the best Sand Sweeper is Lycanroc. Lycanroc is much worse than Excadrill. In Gen 9, Sand has the same time availability as before, but Lycanroc is a considerably worse payoff than Excadrill, and Sand has not been a viable strategy in Gen 9. Unfortunately, Trick Room has always had an issue with time. Unlike Weather and Terrain, no item or ability exists to boost the length of Trick Room. You have to spend 1 turn to set up Trick Room, another to move from the Trick Room setter to the Trick Room abuser, and overall it's a painful process. This part of the equation is unchangeable, and Trick Room's low time availability is fixed. For Trick Room to be good, you have to make the payoff so high that it becomes worth it to use as a strategy. Trick Room has always had good Pokemon, but they weren't good enough to mitigate the low time availability. But if there's a large enough payoff, then Trick Room can still be a good strategy. Last generation we had Melmetal, whose Double Iron Bash was incredibly strong and had a 51% chance to flinch. Unfortunately, Steel is not a good offensive typing and could get walled by the common defensive types of Steel and Water. Pokemon like Toxapex or Slowbro could shut down a Melmetal based onslaught effectively enough, and Trick Room was not a good strategy. But in Gen 9, Ursaluna is that payoff. Ursaluna is such a good, strong Pokemon that it almost single-handedly increases Trick Room's power level to the point where the strategy is worth using. Ursaluna is that guy. Ursaluna has a monstrous 140 base attack that's further boosted by the combo of Flame Orb and Guts. Essentially, it's a free choice fan. On top of that, Facade is a base 140 power attack, just a little bit weaker than Giga Impact. Add in Terra Normal and Ursaluna is the strongest Pokemon Trick Room has ever seen. Even the mighty Great Tusk, with a massive 131 defense stat, dies in 1 shot to a Terra Normal Facade. There is no hope of surviving a hit without an immunity or resistance. But the resistances to normal, like Rock and Steel, lose to Ursaluna's Stab Headlong Rush. Zamazenta Crowned, which was dropped to OU with Pokemon Home, takes on Facade but dies to a Headlong Rush, even with the ability's defense boost. Corviknight doesn't switch in cleanly either, as 2 Facades KO or a Swords Dance and a Facade KOs too. Ghost types don't stand a chance, as Guts boosted Stab Headlong Rush can destroy most Ghost types in the metagame. It happens that quite a few Ghost types are weak to ground anyway, like Skeledirge, Ceruledge, and Goldengo, but even neutral targets like Basculegion and Dragapult take 150% of damage from a Headlong Rush. The double stab combo makes Ursaluna essentially unstoppable, and it has so much destructive strength per turn that even though it's constrained by having to work in batches of 3 to 4 turns, it does enough damage in those turns to be worth it. Most times, offensive Pokemon are measured by how many 2-hit KOs they can get, because it means a Pokemon can't switch into it. But Ursaluna doesn't look for 2-hit KOs, it looks for 1-hit KOs. Ursaluna's 1-hit KO potential is exactly what Trick Room needs to be effective. When you have such a limited availability, you need 1-hit KOs and not 2-hit KOs, and Ursaluna is perfect for that. To stop Ursaluna, you can try swapping between your Ghost type and your Flying type to stall out those few turns of Trick Room, but that's inherently unreliable, Because just as you can predict the Facade versus Headlong Rush, the Ursaluna user can predict you too. Priority moves can be used to outspeed Trick Room, but most priority moves are physical, like Extreme Speed and Sucker Punch, and they barely put a dent into Ursaluna's 130 by 105 defense. Preparing a Terra Ghost for Ursaluna may be what you have to do, or running a move like Protect to stall out turns before you can outspeed it again. Defensively, Ursaluna's raw HP stat enables it enough to take on most hits neutrally. Importantly, Ursaluna can dedicate all of its remaining EVs into HP because unlike other offensive Pokemon, it doesn't need any speed investment. Normal Ground is a pretty average typing, but its main allure is that a lot of attacks only hit it neutrally and that can be swallowed up by the HP stat. Ursaluna's stats are basically min-maxed. The only bad stats are the stats it doesn't care about anyway, like special attack and speed. Trick Room as a strategy also has just enough tools to help enable Ursaluna as well. Hatterene and Cresselia are both effective Trick Room setters because they're tanky enough to live a hit. But they also both have Healing Wish and Lunar Dance respectively, which is good for two reasons. One is that they immediately sacrifice themselves to get Ursaluna in, which means that Ursaluna doesn't have to switch in and take a hit. And second, it means that Ursaluna can do a lot of damage early game and then get healed to do a lot of damage in the late game too. After all, the only thing better than one Ursaluna is two Ursaluna. These two factors are especially relevant for Ursaluna because it has a Flame Orb that slowly chips itself down. There are other convenient partners like Slowking Galar who can use Trick Room as well. As we saw with Corviknight, being immune to one stab and resisting the other isn't good enough. You need to be immune to both. However, there aren't many good Pokemon that do that. The closest you have is Mismagius, who is in the 3rd tier and is otherwise not a great Pokemon. But even if these ungrounded Ghost-type Pokemons ever become relevant, Ursaluna could just adapt by running Crunch and one-hit KO them like that. Ursalunas don't run Crunch right now, but that's mainly because they don't need to and it can adapt just fine to whatever metagame changes happen to come up. The one problem is that Ursaluna may suffer from its own success. Ursaluna is not good only on Trick Room. It has the bulk to be a standard bulky attacker on normal teams too, just like how King Gambit can be. Ursaluna is so strong and unwallable that it may get banned as a whole, for its merits as a whole, irrespective of its impact on Trick Room. If Ursaluna were to get banned, then Trick Room would likely fall into obscurity, just as it's always been for generations. But that's a little far away and there's a lot of moving parts. Magearna was recently banned with its ridiculous Calm Mind stored power moveset, but it was also a good partner for Ursaluna. Will Ursaluna still be good without Magearna as a partner? Because of that ban, Ursaluna lost a good Trick Room partner. Similarly, other metagame factors may be able to shift the tide of Ursaluna's dominance. But for now at least, Ursaluna is the real deal and it's almost single-handedly made Trick Room a viable strategy.